Okay, I'm doing an insert before the video rather than after the video. In the video, I talk about the name Reuben and indicate that Ben is never last in the name form, and so it would be Ben Ra. The other option is that Ben, is not supposed to be there at all. That it's actually, Reuben's name is actually just Ra, seer. And so you have seer, Ben, son of Jacob. So that's the other option, is that they didn't drop the Ben like they did on all the other names. So that's the other option when you get to that part in the video. Okay, I've decided that since it's going to take too long to make a full video of all the prophecies about the last days, Moses, Messiah, man, child, one mighty and strong, Horus, etc. I'll do it in segments like I did my earlier video that nobody watched. So we'll revise it, get straight to the point. And so the one thing to remember, so I've got notes this time, so this isn't me shooting off the cuff from my mind. For the last days, whichever religion you're in, you have a different name for them. It is only necessary if and only if there is a collapse of both the government and religion, because he can't restore the kingdom of God if there's already a church of God and a government that functions properly, giving justice and equality for all its citizens. So there has to be a collapse, apostasy, a falling away of government and religion in order for this person to be needed. And as I'm pointing out, everybody anciently prophesied that there would be a need for this person. All right, so I need to get the quote for this first part, and then I can get into the details. Raise up prophets. One-handed typing here. 11. Okay. All right, Deuteronomy 18. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 18, starting in verse 15. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him shall ye hearken, according to all that thou desirest of the Lord thy God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, neither let me see this great fire any more, that I die not. And yes, I'm using the King James Version, not the JPS version, which is a better translation. And the Lord said unto me, They have well spoken that which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren like unto thee, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. And it shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. Okay, so there you go. This is the indicator of the last days Jewish Messiah. And let me get more brightness to my face here. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, I'm waiting for the president to speak about his big announcement, and he delayed, postponing it for an hour. And then of course he's not going to show up exactly on that hour. He will take his time, make everybody wait, just like dogs begging for food. That's how he sees everybody. Okay. Yes. Trump has to be the bad guy in order for this last days Messiah to be needed. That's just the way it is. Sorry, guys. If you're Trump believers, sorry, you've been betrayed. All right. Okay, so this is a future event. This is the last days Messiah. I will raise like unto Moses. So it's not Moses' day. I hope you understand that. It's some future time. And during the time of Jesus in the New Testament, we see that, yes, Jews were getting a little antsy, and zealot groups were forming and making attacks on the Romans because they wanted this fulfillment. They were wanting freedom. And so as you can see, Jews have had to wait a long time for their promised Messiah. So with the World War II situation, the Jews going back to the land of Israel, Jews were extremely hopeful that hey, this might actually be the time frame. But again, decades have now passed, and Jews are again wondering what's going on. So then Trump, the false government leader, is being treated as if he is Cyrus from the scriptures. And I won't go over that part of the Tanakh. We're just going to cover the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, and the book of Joshua for this segment. Alright, so we start off with the creation story. Creation story is crucial in understanding this concept because it is a part of this whole process. The rising up of land, the promised land, and a millennial piece that starting over after, from chaos emerges order. And that's the same concept, is that in the latter days we'll have chaos and destruction, and out of that chaos will come order with this Jewish Messiah. And when I get into Noah, that's the same thing. The creation story. What is the creation story? The world covered in water, and then land emerges from it. What's the Noah story? Water covers the earth, land emerges. It's the same process, the same concept. But with Noah, it's different in that it's a time frame on earth where the earth becomes corrupt, and thus the need for a last days Messiah. So what you have is Adam and Eve, according to the biblical text, and then many of you know of the story of Lilith, but you have a man and woman who begin, and they have children. That's the process. You have a beginning, and you have a promised land, and You have children on this promised land. You inhabit the land. You fill it. And you turn it into a garden. That's the intention. That's, it's not just God who creates the garden. It's mankind that needs to turn the earth into a garden. And as I've spoken many times in several different forums, when you don't treat the earth properly and turn it into a garden, you don't get access to resources because you end up killing them off, causing them to go extinct. So we've lost a lot of plants, a lot of animals, and we've lost a lot that this earth had to offer, a lot of resources. And so the thing is to create a balance of allowing every species of plant and animal to thrive, but not overwhelm the situation. It needs to be controlled. Thus, garden. You don't want jungle, you want a garden paradise. And so you don't want wolves, you want dogs. If you're not familiar, dogs are wolves. Wolves are the wild dogs, and dogs are domesticated wolves. And that's the whole point and process here that we're talking about. And so with the last days Messiah, world in chaos. And then with the destruction emerges a millennial peace. The lion and the lamb lie down together, or the wolf and lamb, whatever the terminology is. But that's the concept that they're trying to present with the last days. Is that this is the ushering in of millennial peace from the chaos that destroys our world. And so with Noah, he is a descendant through Set, or Seth, as they call him in English. And it's interesting because Set, in the Egyptian text, was the usurper of the throne that threw the world into chaos, having murdered Osiris. So you see there the Jesus comparisons. Jesus is Osiris, who was murdered. And after Jesus' death, the world goes into chaos. And a usurper, Constantine, takes the throne and rules the Dark Ages, as we now call it. And so Christians don't want to accept this, because then that means that there's a need for a restoration. And I'm sorry, but that's the whole point. The man-child, second coming of Jesus, would not be necessary if Christianity was good. And it's not. It comes from the tree of Constantine, which was bad. And so, Mormons, Christians, Jews, nobody understands this part. There has to be chaos before the emerging of order. And the Messiah concept is a part of that process of battling chaos in order to restore order, overcoming the corruption of government and religion, to reestablish the kingdom of God on earth. And so Noah, being a descendant of Set, and I won't go into the details of interpreting how it corresponds with the Egyptian text and how the post-captivity Jew altered the original story. But you have Abel being the Jesus figure, who is murdered by his brother. And then Noah then comes from the family line to restore the kingdom during the earth's chaos. And Noah warns the people. So this is what we need to look for with this last days Messiah, is somebody who's warning the people. If religious leaders are not warning the people, they're not the one. And I'm sorry, but it's not religious leaders anyway, because that's the Tanakh prophecy, that the person will be of low stature. He will not be a government or religious leader. Yeah. Low stature. Noble stock, but low stature. So we'll get to that in the next one. But he warns the people. And obviously the people won't listen to him. So that's the first thing to look for, is somebody who's warning the people and not being listened to, not being given credibility because of his low stature. And there's more to that, but we got to get to those other prophecies to fill in the gaps here. He then gets revelation. So it's somebody who gets revelation, like Deuteronomy 18 talks about. He shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. This is what Noah was doing also. So Noah is a type and symbol of the last days Messiah. And Noah was receiving revelation inspired by God. Hey guys, flood's coming, destruction's coming. Build an ark. And nobody listened, and he built an ark instead. Now this is symbolic of temple, building a temple. And I may have to pause in just a second here, because that's what the creation story is about. With the land emerging, this is where God sets up his house, is on the land that emerges from the water. And that's why temples were built, is that it's the house of God. And so if you don't think we need temples, you're not understanding why temples were had in the first place. But yes, they became corrupted, and thus the destruction of them. And so the ark represents the temple. Notice that the Ark of the Covenant is also similar. Ark of the Covenant, Ark of Noah. They're different words. The Ark of Noah is a boat, even though the Ark of the Covenant for the Egyptians was the boat that traveled across the waters. The Hebrew word, however, is a different word. But in Egyptian, it's the same stuff. The Ark of the Ogdod is the same fashion as the Ark of the Covenant for the Egyptians. And the Ark of the Covenant was placed in the Holy of Holies, temple. Holy of Holies is where you communicate with God, get revelation. And so a mound rising from the waters, a mountain, thus the temple on the top of the mountains. Isaiah. And so this is all types and symbols of temple imagery that's going on in the Old Testament. And so the Ark of Noah indicates that he's receiving revelation from God, and also indicates that he will restore the religion, because out of destruction of the flood, he lands on the top of a mountain. And establishes the kingdom of God on earth with his 3 sons. And that's the concept that's being taught in the story of Noah, is that this last days Messiah will do the same thing. He will restore the kingdom of God, not just the government, but also the religion, which means he will restore the temple. And the Jews understand this. They're waiting for the temple to be restored, to be rebuilt. But it's not just the Jerusalem temple, other temples. Well, we'll get to it, but the United States is supposed to have its temple, because that's the gathering place, as prophesied. But we'll get to that. And so this is the symbolism from Noah. Somebody who warns the people, has revelation from God of danger, nobody listens, but he builds an ark, a temple to communicate with God, and goes to the promised land after the chaos, after the flood, and begins the order with his 3 sons. All right, then we get to Abraham. Yes, Abraham is a dual mixture of the Egyptian Osiris and the Egyptian Horus, the son of Osiris. And so you've got to pick out the ones that apply to Horus in this. Those are the ones that apply to the Jewish Messiah, whereas the others apply to the Messiah that the Jews don't accept. So, yeah. So there's a confrontation with Pharaoh. He leaves, and the Bible prophet, or the Bible writer, says he comes from Ur of Babylon. And other people have tried to say, no, it's Ur in Samaria or other locations in Mesopotamia, to still consider him a Semite. But you got to understand, where did the post-captivity Jews come from in their captivity? Ur of Babylon. Records were found in Ur of Babylon of a Jewish community there. We know Jews were held captive in Ur of Babylon. So for the post-captivity Jew to say, oh, well, Abraham originated from Ur, even though archaeologists all know Ur did not exist in the time of Abraham, according to when he was supposed to exist. So you know that this writer is specifically forcing the text material. So no, Abraham was not a Semite. He was not from Ur of Babylon. And then I can go into other details, but that's not necessary. I'm just focusing on the prophecies of the last days Messiah. So understand this. But notice, he comes out of Babylon. Now when we get to the prophets, they use that type and symbol for the last days Messiah, that he will save the people, bring them out of Babylon. And that's the significance that we do need to take away from this, is that even though Abraham was not from Babylon, there is still a type and symbol here about coming out of Babylon. I'm going to have to hold off, take a break here for a second, and all right. Okay. And so he leaves to go to the promised land. He's inspired by God to leave, and he's got a promised land for him where he can establish a millennium of peace with his family, and ends up having a confrontation with Pharaoh, and I think he's the one with others. There's 2 with him, I think, and then Isaac has 1, or does Isaac have 2 and he has 1? But regardless, Abraham confronts Pharaoh, and in that story, yes, there's some weirdness going on with Pharaoh taking Sarai, and then Abraham wasn't able to have a child with her, but then after they leave Egypt, she gets pregnant. Okay, whatever. But this is the Promised Land theme that Abraham is involved with. And that's pretty much all it is with Abraham as regards to the Horus symbolism, or the Messiah symbolism. So yes, I will be doing an Egyptian version as well. So then we get to Joseph. Now, Jacob, sorta, but it's more of the Osiris symbolism, because of he usurps the brother's birthright and blessing, Esau, and so that's the Cain and Abel comparison, rather than the Noah confrontation to warn the people, and we get to Moses after Joseph here. So yeah, it's not confrontation with Pharaoh. This is the Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel. So that's what Jacob is involved with, is the usurpation theme. But Joseph, however, Joseph comes from the original intended wife of Jacob. If you know the story, Laban says, yeah, you can marry Rachel, but you need to marry Leah first. She's the older daughter. She needs to be married first before any of my younger daughters get married off. And so you have to work 7 years for her. And so Leah has all these sons, and as well as her servant or concubine. And so there are others who are of higher birthright blessing status than Joseph. And this is important to understand. Remember, he's supposed to be of low stature in the latter days. And Leah is the higher stature because she was first married to Jacob. And so Reuben is supposed to be the birthright blessing son. And interestingly, Reuben is 2 Hebrew words, ben, son, most of you should know that, but Ru, which is actually Ra, is not the sun god Ra of the Egyptians. That's Emmanuel, where that is. Amen. But the cities of Ramses, for example, that has Ra in it. This is Seir. Reuben is Seir son, and it's backwards. It should be Ben Ra, son of Seir, because you don't have son last. And that's just the way it works in Hebrew. So it's actually Ben Ra is the birthright son, even though they call him Reuben. They reverse the names. And so he's the seer's son. And so Jacob is the seer. And as a seer, you're supposed to be able to have revelations from God, just like Noah, and just like Abraham. to take your family, leave. And Reuben, however, has no indication of having seer status, but Joseph does. Did you catch that? Reuben is the birthright blessing son, named son of the seer. And yet Joseph is the seer. See how that works? And so the one of low stature is the one who God chose. And so Joseph has these dreams. So the last days Messiah will have dreams, prophecies through dreams. And as a result of Joseph's dreams, nobody likes him in the family, because those dreams are saying, hey, I'm going to rule over all of you. I'm the birthright blessing son. I'm the favored one. So the older brothers, who have are supposed to have the right of birthright over him, because Leah was married first, now they're upset. They don't like that. And so, yes, they throw him in a pit, and he gets imprisoned in Egypt. And so we see then that the last days Messiah, because he's of low stature, he will be imprisoned, and yet he will have dreams. And notice that he got out of prison because he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream, and not just interpret Pharaoh's dream, but come up with a solution to save Egypt. And thus we get to the next part. The last days Messiah will design a new economy. So, sorry, if you thought the United States economy is doing great, you haven't seen my video on ransom economy. So yes, a new economy will be designed in this promised land in the millennium, after chaos is ordered. Okay, now we get to Moses, and we start with the birth. Now, many scholars recognize, hey, wait a minute, this reed basket floating on a river, that's from Sargon I of Old Assyria. And that's correct, but they're missing the Egyptian version. Again, boat on the water and landing on land at the port where the wife of Pharaoh, not the daughter. Daughters are not allowed to have children out of wedlock. It's the house of Pharaoh, which means the queen. The queen gets this child. And this is part of the low stature thing again, is that it's not the birthright blessing wife. Just like Leah was not the intended, because Jacob wanted Rachel. But Leah is the birthright blessing. And so her first son, the son of the seer, is supposed to be the leader of the tribe. But it got switched, usurped. And so here we're seeing the same thing. Moses is found by one of the other wives of Pharaoh, who is not the birthright blessing wife. And so Moses then is not the birthright blessing son, but has a right to the throne of Egypt as the prince of Egypt. That's the cartoon movie version. And so that's an interesting point. Another thing is that as the king's son, the kingdom where live and reside is in the southern region. That's where the crown of Egypt is, in southern Egypt, Karnak. And that's in the south. Now the northern crown, northern kingdom, is where the other sons would be educated. The birthright blessing son gets to stay with father, but the other sons go to be educated in the northern crown, northern kingdom. And so this is something that we can expect from the last days Messiah. He will live in the southern kingdom, but be educated in the northern kingdom. That may not make any sense to you, except for the one who it is. Okay, and then Moses gets falsely accused and is removed from society. This is similar to Joseph being imprisoned. He was falsely accused and imprisoned. Moses is falsely accused, and in the story, he doesn't get imprisoned, removed from society that way. He goes to Jethro, or Ruel is his other name that's mentioned in one reference. The god Ra, Ruel. That's the Ra, Egyptian god Ra, in that instance. I'm pretty sure. I could check Blue Bible if you wanted me to. Or I could probably Google the name Ruel and see if they give me the Hebrew spelling. And we wait for the internet to pop up. Yeah, I found yesterday that I have to have my highest level of service is the third lowest in the area that I'm in. Salt Lake can have the gigabyte speed, but I'm in the suburbs. They don't have it out here in this area. Come on, what's going on? If it takes too long to pop up, I'm going to have to skip it. And they're taking too long. Alright, so, oh, now it pops up. I had to fight with CenturyLink on the phone concerning the, let me have both of these up here. Concerning the discount that they promised to give me when their server went out. And everybody was giving me the runaround and not wanting to do it. And then the one guy said, oh, yeah, I'll give you a 24-hour discount. No, it was longer than 24 hours. Man, what is up with the server today? So, yeah, and then I finally was told, oh, yeah, just pay $10 less on your bill and we'll credit you eventually. And so I'm going, are you sure you're going to credit me eventually and not charge me interest on the overdue amount? So, man, this is taking forever. This is pissing me off. Alright, so he's with Jethro, and this is his imprisonment, technically. He's banished from Egypt. He's removed from society. And yes, he obtains a second wife, but so, yeah, you could say that this last days Messiah will have 2 wives. And obviously, in our time, he won't be a polygamist. It'll be a situation of divorce, which is very common in our society. And because Moses' sister also was upset and wanted him to divorce his Egyptian wife. So 2 wives, and then he goes to the top of a mountain. And this is significant. Isaiah talks about top of the mountains and temple, house of the Lord, and the top of the mountains. And so here Moses is going to the top of the mountains. Temple reference, obviously, where you communicate with God. But he's banished from society. So he's not actually in a temple, but it's clear that he has gone through the rituals of the temple. So he's initiated in the temple. This is the last days Messiah. He will have been initiated in temple rituals, which is the big, oh, there's the clue. Now we know which religion it is. But we'll get to that when we get to that religion. And top of the mountains, again, confirming that yes, that's the religion, because they are centered in the land called top of the mountain. That's what the name of the state is. Okay, now, so notice Moses is of low stature. He's not the legitimate successor, but he is appointed by God directly. And so again, that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for a successive leader in the organization, because he's of low stature, low status. And so we're looking for somebody who's appointed directly by God, not in line for succession. And then he goes and confronts, battles Pharaoh. That's the Egyptian battle symbolism. He speaks out against Pharaoh, let my people go. And yeah, and the Pharaoh, if you're not familiar, he represents not just government, but also religion. He is the great king, and he is the high priest. He is Pharaoh. It is him who sits in the Holy of Holies as a representation of God. And so, yes, he is the King of Kings and the great high priest. And here Moses is, of low stature, not being the legitimate successor to the throne of Egypt, going up to him and battling, saying, "Set my people go, let my people go." And so Pharaoh instead increases the torture of the people. He becomes a tyrant. He demands a building project in the southern land, and the downward land, but in the north, the northern border rather than the southern border, if you get where I'm going with that. But yeah, the Pharaoh increases the torture with building projects. And okay, and then we get to the Exodus. But again, how did the Exodus happen? Because of the creeping death in the Metallica that led to this video. The other video I did leading advertising for this. So you have the birthright blessing son of not only Pharaoh, but of the firstborn of all Egypt. And that indicates that the successor is cut off. Collapse of the government, collapse of the religion. The successor cannot take over the government and the religion anymore. So again, in our day, they're separated, government and religion. So we're looking for the destruction of the government and the religion. No successors. And yeah, that's horrifying. But that's what's expected and prophesied to happen. And so understand that. That's why the religion and the government have to be corrupt in order for a need for the last days Messiah. Okay. And then, yes, the Exodus to the Promised Land, but then there's this whole wandering in the wilderness because of wickedness. But you have the top of the mountain of Horeb, Sinai, whatever you want to call it, where he becomes the lawgiver. He creates a constitutional republic, making a law for the house of Israel to follow. And so he is a government leader. He creates a law for the people to follow, a constitution. All right, and so the book of Joshua was not a part of the original Torah. This was a separate book altogether. But it continues on with the storyline in the books of Moses. And so Joshua, I'm sure most of you know, that's Jesus in Greek. And so, yeah, that's significant. Because the Jesus in the book of Jesus, of the Old Testament, following the Moses narrative, he plays the role of the man-child, or the Jewish last days Jewish Messiah, or Horus, rather than Osiris, Jesus, in the Gospels. So understand that. So you might think, oh, he's a symbol of Jesus who takes us to the Promised Land in the latter days. Well, yeah, if you use that name for the last days Jewish Messiah, or as John the Revelator called him, the man-child. But it's not Jesus. Sorry. There is no second coming of Jesus. The Gospels were mixed with Osiris and Horus imagery. And so, yeah, the last days Messiah is mixed in with Jesus, when Jesus isn't the last days Messiah, because he died, like Abel died under the hand of Cain, his brother. And so you see Jesus, Joshua, who goes into the Promised Land, but he has to battle to obtain the land. And so you have that battle imagery again, chaos. And yes, the falling down of a wall. It's just hilarious. The walls of Jericho. A wall. Anybody catching on? And so yeah, there's this chaos that emerges, and Joshua is the king and the high priest, the last days Jewish Messiah image, to rise among the ashes of the chaos and establish order, establish the kingdom of God in the Promised Land. And so Israel is not really the Promised Land. It's just a symbolic, metaphoric imagery for the Promised Land. Israel was never an independent nation until yeah, never. You know, they've been labeled recently, since World War II, as the nation of Israel, but they really don't have claim. They have to share it with the Palestinians. So they were always tributary anciently. Egypt, that was Ham's land. And so what's a Semite doing coming over into Ham's territory to take over in that portion of the land as his? No, something's wrong with the Bible text. Something else is going on. And so, all right. And then, yeah, crossing the Jordan River. What do they bring with them to cross the water? The Ark of the Covenant. See the symbolism going on here? So, yeah, it all plays a role in this. So Noah and the Exodus crossing the Reed Sea, not the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, all having to do with temple ritual, the Holy of Holies, and the method for, preparing for the afterlife. That's what it's all about. And that's what temple ritual is all about, is preparation for the afterlife. So those are the things to look for the last days Jewish Messiah. And so I hope you see that these are prophecies from the Torah of the last days Messiah. So yeah, and then we'll get into the others. And as you can see, this was 50 minutes just to go over the Torah prophecies alone. So, I don't know.